Canada's finance ministers, all of them, met today in Prince Edward Island to talk economic growth and breaking down internal trade barriers. That's as the Bank of Canada gave a cautiously optimistic economic update today. The bank is holding its key interest rate at 2.25%, predicting an economic rebound.
We've received since April have increased our confidence that the economy is indeed working through this period of global upheaval. Following GDP growth of 0.7% in 2026, the economy is projected to grow by 1.8% in both 2027 and 2028.
Joins me now. Minister, it's always good to see you. Thank you for taking some time today.
Thank you very much. On the back of a very successful federal, provincial, and territorial meeting here in Prince Edward Island.
You were giving the finance ministers an update on the state of the economy and where things are. And also today we got an update from the Bank of Canada. And they're looking at 0.7% growth this year. It's not a recession, but it's not exactly a booming economy. Do you think this is the level of growth Canadians were expecting by now, this stage into the life of this government?
Well, I would say Canadians understand the global challenges. I think you have to put that in the context of the world economy, the challenge we're seeing in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz. Listen, Canadians are well aware of what's going on in the world, but what they understand as well is that despite all that and despite our integration with the U.S. economy, we're still the second fastest growing economy in the G7. So in a way, as you saw with the comments from the Governor of the Bank of Canada and the discussion with my colleagues, today the focus was really on what we can control. You know, we have unity in understanding the challenges and opportunities. We saw also the level of urgency we need to apply in what we're doing and a common understanding of where we are. So I would say despite all that, you know, and people have called that the fog of uncertainty. I think that was the word of the International Monetary Fund. I would say Canada is a lighthouse, and you just have to take the head of the International Energy Agency, which recently said that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Canada to be that energy superpower at a time where the world energy architecture is being redesigned. So, you know, I'm confident the Canadian economy is resilient, and we're taking the action to strengthen our Canadian economy.
Right, but 0.7%, it is second in the G7. I think the most recent projection, certainly by the IMF and others. But you know, the pitch in the election was the fastest growing economy in the G7. The U.S. is going to grow at about 2.5%. A lot of that is the big AI investments that are driving those things. When will Canadians start to see the traction on the things that you can control here? More meaningful progress on interprovincial trade barriers and major projects at a scale that it's really moving the GDP needle?
Well, I think Canadians have seen we're doing things at speed and scale not seen in generation. You're quite right. The major project office is making a difference. If you look at the strategies we have put forward, for example, to double the electricity output, to make sure that we invest, for example, in artificial intelligence, that we seize the megatrends we're seeing around the world. Listen, when you're looking at the G7 countries and you look at Canada, I would say we're still a very big magnet for talent. I'm here in Prince Edward Island, and you know, you have a very vibrant life sciences sector, same thing on the aerospace sector. We have very strong industries. We're one of the very few countries in the G7 that can build a plane from end to finish, build a car, build a ship. We have all the critical minerals to power the economy of the 21st century. We have abundance of energy, and we're doing more now on pipelines, more also on renewable, also on the nuclear energy. We'll be the first G7 country with a small modular reactor in operation. And we're still the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. So when you look at the fundamentals are strong for Canada, because if you look at the megatrend, like you said, it's the digital economy, it's artificial intelligence, it's quantum, and Canada has a leading position in that. A lot of that is also about those who can those who have critical minerals, but also that can extract critical minerals and refine them. Those who have energy that they can export. And in all these fronts, you see Canada playing a leading position. And I think first and foremost, and I'll finish there, you know, just coming back on the back of the trip with the Prime Minister in the Middle East last week. Trust. Our partners around the world, the commodity that people are seeking the most is trust. And Canadians are trusted. Our industry are trusted, our workers are trusted, and we offer stability, predictability, and opportunities not seen in generations. So I think what you see today here in Prince Edward Island is really unity, urgency, and understanding. We're going to seize these opportunities and raise the level of ambition to make sure that we build the economy for the future.
You talked about fundamentals, you talked about trust, you talked about urgency. The finance ministers seem to fundamentally agree that the healthcare system needs more money. Canadians want to trust the system, and they say this is an urgent priority for them. So have they made a case to you? Will you be delivering an increase in health transfers to the provinces in the fall budget?
Well, we have always done our part when it comes to the health transfer. By the way, the health transfer have increased every year, and it's one of the single most important transfer from the federal government to the provinces and territories. So, yes, we had a discussion with that. Well, listen, it's already going up now. It's been going up because we have an escalator, which is the 5% escalator. That's until 28, 29. And we had discussion about also the investments that the federal government has done in mental health, what we've done in health infrastructure, what we've done in long-term care. I think if you ask Canadians, they would see that the federal government has always been there to support. I actually look at dental care, look at pharmacare. I mean, federal government has been there to support Canadians in time of need. Obviously, we need to have the discussion. We had a very open discussion, a very constructive discussion, looking at what the federal government has been doing, understanding also what the needs of the provinces are, and reflecting on that when you think about Canadians. Because at the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer. So it's not just about, is it federal, provincial, is that how can we improve the system? How can we improve the outcome? How can we deliver the best possible health for Canadians across our nation? And certainly there's efficiency, there's innovation, and there's a common understanding that we need to work together to tackle these challenges. Okay, so Minister, just one more topic I want to touch on you with, and this is about whatever the specifics are of the deal to reopen the Gordie Howe Bridge. I know the Prime Minister has explained it that, at least on principle as he sees it, that they share the net profits after a certain number of things are paid back, operating costs, interest during construction, all of those sorts of things. But Bloomberg has a report out where a U.S. official is contradicting that, saying that loan interest and depreciation won't be included in the calculation. So there will actually be more money going to the United States because of fewer deductions on the Canadian side. I don't know if you can resolve this contradiction for us, but do you have a dollar amount of just what it is that Canada has agreed to send to the United States, at least in broad strokes? Because I know you need to see actual traffic and actual costs to give us with precision, but are we talking tens of millions, hundreds of millions? What are we talking about here in this agreement to open the bridge? Well, first of all, I think you were quite right, David, to refer to the comments of the Prime Minister. And you said two words that matters a lot: net profits. Yeah. That's what we're sharing. And I think these two words are key in the calculation, and I would stand by what the Prime Minister has explained and described to Canadians. And also, because today we had, the Canadian ambassador to Washington talking to the colleagues, the sums that will go south of the border will have to be reinvested in economic development south of the border. But how much, and that Minister? Is kind of a... Do we know, what's the number value of this, right? Well, listen, you have to look at the traffic, but you will see these numbers and actual numbers over time. But what I wanted to say is that there's kind of a positive feedback loop, because the more is invested in economic development, the more trade you're going to see. And the more trade you're going to see, the more profits there are going to be. And I think bottom line for Canadians, David, is that we've reopened the bridge. We're tackling one issue at a time with our neighbors to the south. We know those are complex negotiations. I think anyone who's watching the news would understand that. But bottom line, we have been able to reopen. At the time I was infrastructure minister, it was said to be the largest crossing in North America. So this is a strategic piece of infrastructure to enable trade. And I remind our American colleagues that, by the way, this is benefiting 2/3 of the states of the United States of Canada as their first export market. So this is not a one-way street. This is a two-way bridge. We both benefit from opening the bridge and making sure that you can have trade between Canada and the United States as fluently as this piece of infrastructure will provide for businesses on both sides of the border.
Okay, Minister, we're out of time. Minister Champagne, always good to speak with you. Thanks for joining us today, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. You have a nice day.
Well, if it opens July 27th as planned, that Gordie Howe Bridge will be a new link between Canada's busiest border crossing, a link the Ontario government has long supported. Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy joins me now. Minister, always good to see you, sir. Thank you for taking the time today.
Happy to be with you, David.
I wonder if I could get your understanding of what it is Canada has given up or paid to allow the Gordie Howe Bridge to finally open. I know you think this is a necessary thing, an important piece of economic infrastructure. Do you have any idea what the dollar amount of this arrangement is?
I don't, but I do know this, that opening the bridge is a very positive thing, not only for Ontario and for Canada, but it's a really big thing in the interests of Michigan and many states. So this is a very positive development. It's a situation we're in. And of course, the federal government, along with the Ambassador Wiseman in the U.S. and others, negotiated the deal.
Okay, how important is it for the Southern Ontario economy in particular, the exporters, the manufacturers, and the auto sector to have this bridge finally in operation?
Well, it's huge from a commercial opportunity because the amount of traffic that now is going to be freed up to go over that bridge more efficiently, more effectively, but it also sends a powerful message to both sides of the border that we're doing business together. This isn't a bridge that's just going to open and close. This is a bridge that's going to be open. We've found an agreement with Washington. This deal is going forward, as far as we know, later in July. And this will be really, really positive, both from a substantive point of view and certainly from a messaging point of view, that we're doing more business together.
Okay, so I know the conversation there today formally was about the state of the economy, the state of trade, how to knock down more interprovincial trade barriers. But I noticed in the closing news conference there was a lot of talk from various provinces about the need for more health transfers from the federal government. Are you looking for more money beyond the standard escalators, and did you get any indication from Minister Champagne that that might be possible in the fall budget?
Well, it's absolutely essential that we get an increased amount of funding, and not just a little bit, a lot. You know, our healthcare expenditures over the last number of years, 5-6 years, every province on average up 8%, and going forward, the pressures are even greater. So Ottawa collects over about two-thirds of the tax revenue, so they have the income to be able to support us. You know, when this was started, it was a 50-50 deal between Canada and the provinces. We're now at 21%. They're at 79%. They'll argue that maybe there's some tax points, whatever, but it doesn't matter. We are massively under that initial 50-50 deal. 41 million Canadians are relying on us from coast to coast to coast to provide them health care, and we can't have a healthy economy without healthy people. So absolutely, that was a huge priority in our discussion today.
Well, look, the transfer of the tax points is a material thing, right? Because a lot of provinces have sort of vacated some fiscal capacity by cutting fees and cutting taxes, but I don't want to kind of litigate that. I'm just wondering if you got an indication from Minister Champagne whether he heard you and is willing to do something to satisfy this demand in the fall budget, because they've got a lot of things on their spending list, Minister, as you're well aware.
Yeah, no, this is part of a healthy economy. He definitely listened. He definitely heard. He heard us. You know, our tariff and trade situation has done two things in Canada. It's unified us, and it's to give us a greater sense of urgency. I would say on the healthcare file, this is a state of urgency, I should say. All the provincial finance ministers, territorial ministers, all agreed that this was a top priority. And look, we're nowhere close to getting back to even with the arguments about who funds what. This is an imperative. I think the premiers will beat that drum even louder next week. So it's not just about building an economy. I give the Prime Minister and his colleagues and the Minister of Finance a lot of kudos for focusing on the economy in a way we haven't seen in over a decade. Faster permitting, regulations, building pipelines, major projects, working together on Section 232, which is impacting Ontario, auto companies, steel companies, forest products. So I give them a lot of credit, but it's not either or. They got to deal with the health care.
Okay, yes, I understand the premiers are meeting with the Prime Minister next week, and PEI will be there covering that, and we'll see if they get anywhere with this with the Prime Minister. But just as a final point, Minister, you announced today that Ontario was, I think you were the last province, you were the holdout that was going to join sort of the regulatory passport system for national securities regulatory issues. Why have you decided to do this? This is something the business community has wanted for a while, easier to comply with, easier access to capital. What finally got you on board with everybody else here?
Well, the passport system, for all your viewers, was launched in 2008, would give access to every business, regardless of province, to get a prospectus cleared. And so many finance ministers in Ontario looked at this. I looked at this and said, we have to get on board with interprovincial trade. We have to get free trade. Why is this a barrier that's in place today? So Ontario, again, is taking leadership, joining the system. You know, kudos to Quebec and BC and Alberta, who all asked me to look at it. We delivered, but in return, I want them to deliver quicker, faster dropping of interprovincial trade barriers. We need to have urgent ambition. I'm sure that'll be a topic next week with the Prime Minister and the Premiers. This is our opportunity, but we got to go faster. Has that stalled? Just as a final point, it feels like there was a lot of progress very early as the low-hanging fruit got taken care of, but you're now getting into the more where there's more friction in some areas. Well, there's always friction. You know, everyone has their interest, but you know, the upside is the boost to the economy and jobs, up to $200 billion of GDP. It's also, we've seen progress on mutual recognition, on some provinces on alcohol, on credentialing, on, you know, but we have more to do. And I just want to impress all my colleagues, and I did today, that Ontario's showing leadership. We got rid of all the exemptions. We one of the first provinces to do that, right, to clear the way for a free trade deal. We're moving forward on securities. We're moving forward on alcohol. You know, everyone has to just double down on their leadership in this country for the benefit of our workers and our businesses in Canada when we have external threats to our economy. Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy, always appreciate the time, sir. Thanks for joining us. Pleasure. So with today's finance meeting wrapping up, attention shifts instantly to next week's First Minister's meeting in Charlottetown. And for the province, it appears a clear strategy is maybe forming up here. When the premiers sit down, they will be bringing a heavy list of demands, starting with a major permanent increase to federal health care funding. Eric Girard is the Minister of Finance for Quebec, and he joins me now. Minister Girard, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you again, sir.
Thanks for having me.
We noticed a theme in the closing press conference that the provincial finance ministers are raising the need for more healthcare spending. What is your sense of whether or not Minister Champagne will deliver that in the fall budget?
I think today's meeting was very helpful to make him aware of how important his next budget is. And the reason is that the floor of the Canada Health Transfer, you know, there's a minimum increase every year of 5%. The floor is going to 3% next year. So the number one ask is for the floor to be maintained at 5%. Which is more, it's 5% or nominal GDP, and it's more coherent with the trajectory of spending by provinces and territories. The second ask is there are bilateral agreement with respect to mental health, home care, and long-term care, and these funding are expiring, and they create holes in our financial framework. And these are all expiring within the next 2 years, and therefore, again, very important that these transfers be made permanent and also increase at least 5%. So he was not aware of the urgency for provinces and territory to renew these funding agreement in order for us to deliver for our citizens.
Right, so 2 percentage points on the core Canada Health Transfer, not having it drop down to 3% from 5%, and then extending the others. The percentage numbers are small, but this is billions and billions of dollars when you add it up. And they have a big shopping list, as you know. So do you think they truly have the space, Minister, to deliver that?
Well, I think healthcare is the number one funding expense for provinces and territory, and it is their largest transfer at $54 billion in the 25-26. And therefore, it's very important that before we expand responsibilities or, for example, do more on dental care or do more on defense spending, that we do honor our commitments to Canadian citizens of providing quality public health care. So I think it's really the number one ask. Second would be infrastructure funding. I must say, we just signed Quebec $10 billion over 10 years of funding for infrastructure from the federal government. It's excellent, it's very helpful, but $10 billion over 10 years in comparison to the $167 billion we're going to spend is a small amount. So the second ask is for increased funding in infrastructure. But to be fair, we just negotiated a $10 billion transfer over 10 years, very helpful.
So I just wonder, Minister, I know there was a lot of discussion, obviously, on interprovincial trade, the state of the Canada-U.S. relationship, and the overall picture of the Canadian economy. The Quebec economy is very heavily exposed to what's happening in the United States, right? With softwood lumber, aluminum, your cultural sectors, all either being hit with tariffs or maybe targeted in the trade talks, along with dairy and supply management. Well, what is your sense of where things stand now on the Canada-U.S. side after being briefed by Ambassador Wiseman today? And how much longer can this go on before you see some real permanent economic scarring in these key sectors in Quebec?
Yeah, so we're being affected. We all remember that this started in February 2025, and here we are, July 26, still facing sectoral tariff of 50% on aluminum, 46% total softwood lumber. Quebec is the province with the largest share of manufacturing in its economy. So Quebec and Ontario are the ones suffering the most. And it's very important that that we keep focused, keep engaged. But obviously what's missing, what appears to be missing, is the attention of the president. We need to find a way to reach an agreement soon to convince them, convince him that these sectoral tariffs are not good for the North American economy. They're not good for North American citizens. They're increasing the cost of living for American citizens. And so what's missing, I would say, is the number one ingredient that is missing is the attention of the president.
Well, that's interesting. And just as a final point, Minister, because Section 232 tariffs, of course, they're imposed by the president through executive order. So they can talk to Jamieson Greer, the trade representative, about the broader agreement, but he has no authority to deal with that. And that's the challenge with everything happening with Iran and the midterms and all of these things with the president. It's getting him focused on that. Is that what you mean by that statement, that he's just focused on other things?
I mean, I think the federal government is doing an honest effort of engaging Jamieson Greer and all the relevant U.S. parties that are involved in the negotiation, and Mexico is doing the same, and we've expressed clearly our interest to reach an agreement on the revision and to extend to renew the agreement. But until the negotiators on the U.S. side have perhaps a clear mandate to resolve this issue, or perhaps until it resonates that U.S. citizens are paying ultimately these tariffs, we see the progress seems really slow when you realize that it started in February 25 and that we're now in July 26.
Yes, it feels like only yesterday, but it also feels like forever. Eric Girard, Minister of Finance for Quebec, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Can I add one thing? I would like to praise Ontario collaboration today on joining the passport system for securities regulation. This is very important for our finance industry in Canada, and it was a long-term demand of Ontario, Alberta, and BC to have mutual recognition for initial public offering for registration. And today, Ontario joining the passport system in securities regulation was an important milestone to improve the Canadian economy, to help Canadian business prosper, and to grow our financial sector.
Okay, no, it's a good point. It's always good to focus on the things that are getting done and not just the things that aren't getting done. Eric Girard, we appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.